bhutesu kaschit artha vyapasraya. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. A self-realized man has no purpose to fulfill in the discharge of his prescribed duties, nor has he any reason not to perform such work, nor has he any need to depend on any other living being. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. A self-realized man is no longer obliged to perform any prescribed duty, save and except activities in Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is not inactivity either, as will be explained in the following verses. A Krishna conscious man does not take shelter of any person, man or demigod. Whatever he does in Krishna consciousness is sufficient in the discharge of his obligation. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Well, this is teaching us the value system of a devotee. Everybody has values, but these verses, especially in the third chapter, are explaining how a devotee has no obligations other than pleasing Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the verse says, a self-realized man has no purpose to fulfill in the discharge of his prescribed duties. In other words, he doesn't have any self or selfish uh, purpose in the execution of prescribed duties. He's only acting to please Krishna and under the instructions of the bona fide spiritual master. He has no personal, what you would call, agenda. His only purpose is to please Guru and Krishna. So the verse says again, a self-realized man has no purpose to fulfill in the discharge of his prescribed duties, nor has he any reason not to perform such work, nor has he any need to depend on any other living being. Purport, Srila Prabhupada. A self-realized man is no longer obliged to perform any prescribed duty, save and except activities in Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is not inactivity either, as will be explained in the following verses. A Krishna conscious man does not take shelter of any person, man or demigod. Whatever he does in Krishna consciousness is sufficient in the discharge of his obligation. Okay, so that means that a Krishna conscious person depends completely on his bona fide spiritual master and ultimately Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that means that one should definitely have a bona fide spiritual master who is completely surrendered to Krishna. And by following the instructions of the bona fide spiritual master, the student also becomes completely surrendered to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And there's no personal agenda in the life of a completely surrendered devotee. However, the completely surrendered devotee purpose in life is to please Guru and Krishna. So, by the instructions of the Guru and Shastra, the devotee acts uniquely for pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. And in this way, one is free of karma. Karma is, let's say, one accumulates karma by acting independently of the Lord. But one gets rid of karma by acting only to please the Lord without any personal desires. The devotee has desires, but those desires are to please Krishna, not to please his own sense gratification. So, therefore, such a person is referred to as a self-realized man. What is a self-realized man? He realizes that number one, he is not this body, and but he is the eternal servant of Krishna, and whatever assets he has, such as the body or other assets, he uses them only in the service of Krishna. Therefore, a self-realized man has no purpose to fulfill in the discharge of his prescribed duties. Well, his purpose is to
Hare Krishna Maharaj, we lost you.
the Battle of Kurukshetra, in which 600 million people died. It's one of the most, in 18 days, the most terrible battles in the history of the world. I mean, in all the battles in World War II, about 60 million people died. But in 18 days of battle in Kurukshetra, 600 million people died. So it was a much more terrible battle. Basically, only the Pandavas, at the end of the battle, there was mainly just the Pandavas that maybe a few other people that did not die. So it was such a disastrous battle. But yet, the Pandavas did not die because they were protected by Krishna. And they were fighting only on the order of Krishna without any personal, let's say, motive. Their only purpose was to please the Lord by following his instruction. That's why it says in his verse today, a self-realized man has no purpose to fulfill in the discharge of his prescribed duties, nor has he any reason not to perform such work, nor has he any need to depend on any other living being. Okay, now there's some background to this verse. Let's take a look. In Sanskrit, it says, it says that a self-realized man has no purpose to fulfill in the discharge of his prescribed duties. Well, where did he get those prescribed duties from? A self-realized man is someone who knows that he is the eternal servant of Krishna. And he gets his prescribed duties from Krishna himself. So he doesn't need anybody else's instruction at that point. Now he knows what he has to do. He has to be engaged without any personal, let's say, agenda. He has to be engaged in the pure devotional service to the spiritual master, who is the bona fide teacher. And the spiritual master is completely dedicated to serving Krishna with love and devotion. So now the devotee, excuse me. Okay. Mhm. Yeah, the devotee is on the right path. Okay. So a self-realized man is no longer obliged to perform any prescribed duty, save and accept activities in Krishna consciousness. Well, the text of this is when someone, let's say, is in Krishna consciousness, let's say he's like 24 years old, and now, let's say he drops out of college because he wants to be a devotee, and he's engaged in devotional service 24 hours a day. Sometimes the parents get upset. They don't understand. They say, look, we supported you, we paid for your education, we had so many expectations, and all of a sudden you became a devotee and you stopped all that. And it's almost as if you don't even identify yourself as our son anymore. Well, actually, that's not true. It may look like that, but it's not true. unless the devotee is, let's say, abusive. But if he's very surrendered to Krishna, that means that he has to be also very respectful of his relatives, his family, and uh, he should not be antagonistic. If there are members of the family who are antagonistic, then he just avoids their association until they calm down a little bit. And so uh, when the members of the family realize that their son, although he may be, you know, a dropout from college and he joined Krishna consciousness, but he's become a much better person because of being Krishna conscious. Now, if the son does not become a much better person by joining Krishna consciousness and is abusive and he ignores his parents and so forth, that's a problem. That means that he's not actually surrendered to Krishna. He's still being led by his false ego. But when a genuine devotee surrenders completely to Krishna, then he's always kind and gentle to everyone, especially his parents and relatives. Even though they might not understand in the beginning what he's doing, they might even be against what he's doing. But if he maintains his respect and gentleness, eventually the parents or the relatives realize he's actually a much better person now than what he was before. So, and then a self-realized man, what does that mean, self-realized? He realizes that his real position is to be the eternal servant of Krishna. Therefore, he's no longer obliged to perform any prescribed duty other than activities in Krishna consciousness. So, Krishna consciousness is not inactivity either, as will be explained in the following verse. The Mayavadis believe that by inactivity they avoid karma, but that's not true. You acquire karma by being inactive. So, it's important to understand these verses so we don't get a false understanding. So, a self-realized man is no longer obliged to perform any prescribed duty. Well, these are prescribed by who? Well, mundane people. So, when one becomes self-realized, he understands his eternal relationship to Krishna and spiritual master, and therefore he has no purpose to fulfill in the discharge of his prescribed duties. That means that he's not interested in any sense gratification. He's interested only in pleasing Guru and Krishna. Nor has he any reason not to perform such work. Yeah, if you don't perform such work, that's actually sinful. The duty of a genuine devotee is to act according to the instructions of Krishna and Guru. Okay. Nor has any need to depend on any other living being. Yes. Krishna will always see when you depend on someone else, you're no longer completely dependent on Krishna. But if you completely surrender to Krishna, you don't need to surrender to anyone else. So a self-realized man is no longer obliged to perform any prescribed duties, save and except activities in Krishna consciousness. Okay, that means there are activities, but they're only Krishna conscious activities. Krishna consciousness is not inactivity either, as will be explained in the following verse. Yeah, there's plenty of activity in Krishna consciousness. A Krishna conscious man does not take shelter of any person, man or demigod. Yeah, but he takes complete shelter of Guru and Krishna. Whatever he does in Krishna consciousness is sufficient in the discharge of his obligation. Okay, well, what does that mean? That means that he's only obliged to do things in Krishna consciousness. He's not obliged to do other things. Okay. Like, for example, let's take the example of um, different activities, like uh, if people celebrate, um, they celebrate with the firecracker on,
Independence Day.
huh?
Independence Day.
Independence Day. We're not obliged to go to those type of programs, right? Uh, sometimes, sometimes people do, devotees do that because they want to distribute books to, the people there. There's a large number of people in one place, but we're not there for seeing the firecrackers. We're there maybe for distributing books to the people. So that's why self-realized man is no longer obliged to perform any prescribed duty, save and except activities in Krishna consciousness. Now, parents may be really confused by a statement like that, but the devotee is not. He knows that by completely surrendering to Krishna, all their problems will be taken care of in this life. Okay, but it's not an excuse to be inactive or lazy. Uh, when Prabhupada heard sometimes that sometimes he would come to the temple and he would hear or see that devotees were not waking up early in the morning coming to Mangala Arati, he would get really upset. And he would say, look, Krishna consciousness is not a free hotel or a free restaurant. And he was very right. We have to work harder in Krishna consciousness than the karmis work. And karmis work really hard. American people work very hard, but they're working for their own sense gratification. But the devotee can work even harder, but without any desire for sense gratification. So therefore, the devotee is regulated in his activities so he can work with a lot more vigor and energy and please Guru and Krishna. Okay. Now the point, a Krishna conscious man does not take shelter of any person, man or demigod. Why not? Because he takes complete shelter of Krishna. It's not that he doesn't take shelter of anyone, but he doesn't take shelter of any mundane people. He takes complete shelter of Krishna. Whatever he does in Krishna consciousness is sufficient in the discharge of his obligation. Well, what is his obligation? You have obligation to family, you have obligation to friends, you have obligation to this, that. All his obligations are satisfied by engaging in pure devotional service. You have to have that base. And if you do, then you don't have to worry about this obligation, that obligation. Our real obligation is to be completely surrendered to the Lord and to spread Krishna consciousness. And that's why it says, whatever he does in Krishna consciousness is sufficient in the discharge of his obligation. Okay, are there any questions? this verse says, a self-realized man has no purpose to fulfill in the discharge of his prescribed duties. When it says no purpose to fulfill, no selfish purpose to fulfill.
Mhm.
Yeah, he has a purpose to fulfill, that's to please
Please,
Krishna,
Krishna.
but no selfish purpose. Nor has he any reason not to perform such a work. If he doesn't perform his prescribed service or duty, that's that is sinful, actually.
And in fact, I think in the following verses, Krishna also says that even he, I mean, obviously he doesn't have any responsibility to do because he's the supreme, Lord, but he still does it to set the right standard,
Follow the leader.
follow the leader here.
Yeah. Okay.
Very cool.
Now, are there any questions?
Hare Krishna, I'll ask one question.
Yes, please. Hare Krishna.
What? Yes, Hare Krishna. What did you mean when you said one who acts independently is gaining karma?
Well, the key word there is independently. When you act independent, outside the instruction of the Guru and Krishna, you will accrue karmic reactions, or you will accrue karma. Karma is actions that are not meant to please Krishna. So devotional service are actions also, but they are actions to please Krishna. If
Oh,
you just, yeah,
okay.
you understand?
Yes, thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hmm.
Any other questions? That was a good question. Okay, the last sentence in this very short purport has extreme, let's say, value for understanding Krishna. So, whatever he does in Krishna consciousness is sufficient in the discharge of his obligation. So, as soon as we're born, we have obligations to our parents, our relatives, our school, our neighbors, so many obligations, right? But actually, when we become Krishna conscious and we act always in Krishna conscious, whatever is done in Krishna consciousness is sufficient in the discharge of obligation. So become Krishna conscious seriously, you no longer have any other obligations. That means you don't sit around and be a lazy bum, but you're always acting in Krishna consciousness for the welfare of all. So you'll go on Sankirtan, you'll preach, you'll chant, you'll dance, you'll hear lectures, you'll have festivals and so forth. So you're acting more in Krishna consciousness than in material activities. And you have more energy also because your activities are spiritual. They're no longer materialistic activities. Therefore, a self-realized man has no purpose to fulfill in the discharge of his prescribed duties. That means no selfish purpose. But he does have a purpose. It's to please Guru and Krishna and to spread Krishna consciousness to whoever he may encounter in life. But he doesn't have any personal selfish purpose to discharge. Okay. And a Krishna conscious man does not take shelter of any person, man or demigod. But he does take complete shelter of Guru and Krishna. whatever he does in Krishna consciousness is sufficient in the discharge of his obligation. So, we have family obligations, we have friends obligations, we have government obligations. But if we act sincerely in Krishna consciousness and very proactively, then that is sufficient in the discharge of all obligations that we may have. Okay, so we will stop right there unless there are more questions or a discussion.
Any other questions?
See, the last sentence in this very short purport has a lot of meaning. It says, whatever he does in Krishna consciousness is sufficient in the discharge of his obligation. But what is our real obligation? A real obligation in life should be to please Krishna. And by pleasing Krishna, Krishna will help us on the path of devotional service and ultimately liberation from the cycle of birth and death. So whatever we do in Krishna consciousness is sufficient in the discharge of his obligation. So many people have obligations. Like one time, Aristotle okay, there was a disciple of Aristotle, and the disciple was speaking to him. He said, Gurudev, my only desire is to be with you and hearing your lectures every day. But first, I have to go to this country and invade that country and conquer it. Then I have to go to this other country. Then I have to go to this other country. And then after all this conquering, then I'll come back and sit down with you. So then the guru said, but you're sitting with me right now. Why do you have to go anywhere else? No, I have to first do this, do that. So that's what you would call a false concept. If you're sitting and hearing from the spiritual master, you don't have to go anywhere else, right? You don't have to conquer this country or that country. And then after all that activity, then you come back. It's just like when Prabhupada first met his guru, the first few minutes of meeting Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he said, you're an educated man. You should engage, and you can speak English. You should engage yourself in preaching in the English-speaking world. But Prabhupada didn't actually start doing that for at least over 50 years. It's because he was married, he had kids and so forth. So then he said, I should have immediately started doing that. Because why did I wait till I was he waited till he's like 58, 59 years old. He got that instruction when he was like 20, in his 20s. But he had a new family, he had kids, he had 5 kids and a wife and so forth. But anyway, he still did a tremendous amount of devotional service to please his guru and Krishna. But he could have started right away and not waited so long. Okay? But better late than never. That's a fact. So sometimes we feel, oh, I have to do this first, I have to do that first. It's like there's some young guys, they usually think, well, I want to be Krishna conscious, but first I got to learn Sanskrit. No, you don't have to learn Sanskrit. That's why Prabhupada translated in English all the Shastras, so you don't have to spend 12 years to 15 years to learn the Sanskrit language, which it takes at least 12 years to learn Sanskrit. Okay, thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama.
Hare Hare.